And good morning. Welcome to the boardroom. My name is Trevor Lutz. I'm the president and CEO of Sandcastle Community Management. And every Saturday morning, we bring you this program called The Boardroom. The Boardroom really is the radio authority of everything condominium and HOA related. We bring you the professionals every week. People that if you don't know today, you're probably going to need tomorrow. Individuals that can help your association run a little smarter, a little smoother, and add some professional flair to your organization. And today is no different. We're lucky enough to have Josh Porter in the studio. Josh is the president for Consult Engineering, and today we are talking about project management. And I guess if you're thinking to yourself, what is project management? Well, this means this is the show for you. Josh, we're glad to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
And I love when professionals such as yourself come into the studio because I know you're going to enlighten me, and this is a topic that I'm probably a little naive on, and so you're going to enlighten us. And so we're talking about project management and how it relates to associations, whether it's a condominium, co-op, HOA. So let's talk a little bit about, what is project management? What are we talking about?
Well, eventually every association, condo or HOA, is going to undertake some sort of project. It's going to be a large painting project, a re-roofing project, building restoration project, something of that nature. And eventually somebody's going to manage it. It's either going to be the board, or they're going to try to make the property manager manage it. Or if they follow recommendations of a lot of property managers and experts, they'll hire a professional project manager to oversee the project.
And you really want that because, as much as you rely on your property management company, or you rely on your neighbor next door who used to be something or other up north, you need local professionals to help you through big projects in particular.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when an association tries to take on a project themselves, a lot of times it's because they have a board member or somebody in the association that says, oh, well, I used to do this back before I retired, and I can easily manage this and oversee it. And I think the big problem with that is you really run into, in my opinion, a conflict of interest in a lot of cases, because you have somebody who's on the board managing the project, and then contractors are also kind of leery of working with those types of individuals as well.
Well, and also you're putting probably an undue burden on a fellow homeowner who is probably down here for the sole purpose of playing golf and enjoying the sunshine, and now all of a sudden you've just eaten up a lot of their day and their short time here doing this project management.
Exactly.
And so, but certainly you work on associations, you work with individuals that are professionals, prior retired professionals in their field. So you don't have an objection to that, of course.
No, in fact, they make the best liaisons between us as project managers and the board, because they understand what we're talking about, and they can kind of a lot of times convert that into layman's terms for the board or the association, or just simply give the board a thumbs up that what the project manager is saying is legitimate and makes sense.
Adds additional credibility to what you're already advising them on. Okay, certainly. Great. When should an association be hiring a professional instead of just managing themselves? What is the criteria?
The two controlling factors are the overall cost of the project. You're really not going to be hiring a project manager, let's be real, to manage a $25,000 project. You're going to spend half that on top just on the project manager and the expert information that they're going to provide you. But eventually the project will become expensive enough that it justifies the cost. And that's basically once engineering or architectural project management can reach that 10% or less marker. Once you're spending 10% or less on the actual project management, then your project is probably valued enough. We can manage some projects, at the $50,000 range, but more often than not, we're managing projects at the $100,000 and above price line.
Now, that's not to say that if a board has a project that's $25,000, if they want to bring in a second set of eyes to look at something, that's something you could do.
Certainly. What we've done on smaller projects like that is advise them. We'll do condition assessments of whatever they're looking at. Let's say they're looking at a small roof. Maybe we'll come out and they'll just spend a little bit of money on us to survey the roof and determine if it's time to replace it or not, for example. And then, the other thing that we can do is oftentimes for smaller projects is at least put together some basic bid packages so that the board is going out and trying to get apples to apples bids, but really they're going out and getting them themselves. We're just preparing the documentation. And then for managing the project, again, projects that are under $50,000, they might hire us to just do one or two inspections, but not to fully manage the whole project.
Okay, so the cost is certainly a factor, and then the complexity you said as well, depending on how complex the job is. So I guess you could have a lower cost job that was still complex that you may want to jump in and take a look at.
Yes, certainly. Roofs, again, as an example, are something that have fewer moving parts, as we like to say, than something like a building restoration, which can have a lot of different aspects and factors. In a building restoration project, a lot of times you're dealing with aluminum screen enclosures, you're dealing with waterproofing, concrete repair, sealants, stucco, painting. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different trades and a lot of different aspects of the project. It's much, much more complex. And in building restoration, for example, very, very few people on boards have that even past experience or expertise dealing with it because it's such a specialized field.
Now, also, when you come to another big project or a big ticket item is asphalt resurfacing, and when people are redoing parking lots. I mean, that's something where I assume they would be calling you in as well.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, that's one of the fields where there's very little project management going on currently with asphalt milling and resurfacing jobs. Where you see it mostly is in that roofing and in the building restoration. That's become sort of a norm. People expect to hire somebody to do that. But asphalt milling and resurfacing has sort of, I think, become like a societal norm that it's easy to do.
Right.
They're just going to come in, scrape it off, and put the new stuff down. How hard can it be? And it's actually a very, very complex process. And it's a process that occurs over a very short window. So a lot can go wrong in just 24 hours if it doesn't have proper oversight and proper design and specifications.
Sure. I've run into a lot of homeowners that in their prior lives did something in that field in the asphalt, and almost always in the north. And of course, they bring a little different take to what the requirements are here in Florida. And I think, personally speaking, I think this is where you certainly it would behoove them to hire someone like a Consult Engineering to look at that, because a lot of times what works in the north doesn't work in the south.
That is true. And also the quality of workmanship can sometimes vary greatly from north to south, depending on the trade that you're talking about. Asphalt seems to be one of those things where the big contractors that do large roads down here, interstates and stuff like that, they tend to do a very, very good job. And some of the asphalt companies that are mostly seal coating, but then they occasionally do milling and resurfacing, those are the ones that maybe lack a little bit of the experience, and sometimes they tend to produce a lower quality job.
And the guy that shows up with a pickup with a spray nozzle and some black stuff in the back of the truck, probably don't go with that guy.
Yeah, I heard about an association at a trade show recently where the asphalt company, air quotes, came out, and it was one guy. And he drove the asphalt truck and laid the asphalt. Then he got out, ran to the other end of the street and got on the roller, and then rolled it across the asphalt a couple times, then got out and ran down the street and got into the other roller.
That's multitasking, isn't it? Okay. Now, some of the other projects I know you've worked with clients on is, something that's sort of complex is fire alarm modernization. I mean, that's sort of a big deal when you start getting into that project.
Yeah, certainly. And the building officials and the fire marshals are really paying more attention to these as well. You're getting to the point now where you can't replace the main components of these systems a lot of times until you upgrade the full system to the current code. And of course, that code is constantly evolving. So making sure that the new system meets the code is very important. We have one project going on right now where the client, before hiring us, and part of the reason why they hired us was because they received 4 different bids, and the bids ranged from $100,000 to $400,000+. Wow. And interestingly enough, none of the bids had taxes included. So once you call the contractors, taxes are going to be. So it's one of those things, and everybody had a different scope, different product they were proposing, and that's where we go back to that apples to apples bidding, and we said to them, hey, listen, we really need to get all the bidders in line and bidding the same exact thing.
Now, are there different levels of project management or types of project management that you provide to clients?
Well, we tend to provide what I call basic project management and owner representation services.
Okay.
We sort of have our own internal definition between 3 different types of project management. And the first is construction administration, and the other 2 are basic project management, which most engineering and architectural firms that do what we do can provide. And then there's this service that we kind of feel is unique to what we're providing to condo and homeowner associations, and that is owner representation.
And that's important because as an owner representative, you're actually there on behalf of the board and the association, not as a contractor representative. You're there to help the board make sure that everybody else is honest and on the same playing field. Yeah,
and as part of our owner rep services, I mean, it goes all the way back to the beginning when the project is bid out. When the project's bid out, every bidder is aware that we are going to be providing owner representative services, that we're going to be checking the quality of the work, and that we're going to make them redo and tear out anything that isn't done up to our quality standards.
Do you find the contractors get nervous when you show up and you're part of that project?
The saying we have in our office is that the bad contractors really do not like us at all. They don't like being held to a higher standard. They think we're nitpicky. The good contractors really like us because what happens is they know that we're constantly on the job, constantly nitpicking, and then we can turn around to the client and say, hey, they did the job right, and they get paid.
Well, we're talking about project management. We have Josh Porter. He's the president for Consult Engineering in the studio today. And Josh, we've got a lot more to cover here, but if people need to get a hold of you and have some immediate questions, how do they get a hold of you?
They can call our 1-800 number. That's 1-800-550-3379, or they can check us out on the web at consultengineering.com.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a lot more to come here on the boardroom. My name is Trevor Lutz. Stick with us through this break, and we're talking to Josh Porter, project management. It's important. Stick with us. Every Saturday morning, we bring you the boardroom, a program dedicated to highlighting and giving you the opportunity to listen to professionals in the field of homeowners associations, condominium associations, the professionals that we rely on in making sure that we do our duties and maintain our communities properly. Today, we have Josh Porter with us in the studio. He's the president for Consult Engineering. And Josh, we're glad you're here. We're talking about project management. Josh, tell us a little bit about Consult, first of all, for those that have never maybe hired an engineer, never thought about hiring an engineer for anything on their association.
Certainly. The company was started about a little over 4 years ago, and it was specifically designed to provide all the consulting services that would be needed for condo and homeowner associations. We pursue very, very, very little new construction engineering work or anything like that. I'm a structural engineer, and the firm is a structural engineering firm by nature, but we also end up providing a lot of other ancillary services, and project management is actually one of our biggest services that we provide to condos, in addition to doing condition surveys, roof testing, building testing, and reserve studies, and then also occasionally we have to provide expert witness work.
Okay. Before the last break, we talked about there are several different types of project management. Construction administration, basic project management, and owner representation. Let's talk a little more about what the differences are between the different types.
Certainly. Well, the three definitions are really kind of an internal definition system that we use. A lot of other firms out in the industry will all call themselves project managers or whatever. So with that said, we define construction administration as project management specifically dealing with processing the paperwork and making sure that the work is done. So in that kind of service in construction administration, the project manager might go out to the job site, but he's really only there to make sure, okay, A, B, and C were done, so I can go ahead and process payment for that. Basic project management does the same things that a construction administrator does, but they also provide a lot more consulting in the design and bidding phases. They can spec the project out a lot better, and they also have a closer eye on the overall project schedule and the budget, and they report those things back to the association on a regular basis. And then the third service, which is kind of taking it another step further, which is what we like to focus on and provide, is owner representation, which basically does everything that the previous two services did. But the key is that we don't just concern ourselves with whether items A, B, and C are done, but we're very concerned with whether they're done correctly. So we're constantly on the job. If it's a roofing project, we're on the roof. If it's a building restoration project, we're writing the stages for every drop. We're inspecting everything that gets done by the contractor to make sure that you are getting what you paid for.
Now, I've had the opportunity to work with a number of different consultants, including your firm. And you talked about the construction administration, primarily paperwork driven. And people out there may be saying, well, paperwork, we can do that. But one of the important parts of that is particularly when you're doing large jobs and you're doing draws. And so you need to make sure that, the proper amount of work was done so draws can be processed properly. And that's something where we rely on you.
Certainly, yeah. The contractors send out applications for payment, and it is the job of the construction administrator to make sure that the contractor has actually executed the amount of work that he's asking for payment for. He makes sure that proper waivers and releases of liens are received with that payment application to protect the interests of the association, and they're also monitoring the progress of the overall job.
Can you give us some examples of the type of project management services, starting with construction administration?
Yeah, and we touched on roof consultants as being an industry that tends to provide this type of construction administration service. They're doing the pay application draws. They're also usually putting out the project to bid. and then they are going out to the job site and making sure that the work is being done, that the proper materials are there. But beyond that, they don't tend to walk the roofs a lot, and they're not really in the face of the contractor to make sure that the contractor is really doing his job, because, when it comes down to it, legally, it's the contractor's job to do his job.
Right.
The design criteria and specifications for the roofing contractor are usually prepared by roof consultants, and a lot of times construction administrators that are solely providing that service and are not licensed professionals, a lot of times don't carry professional liability insurance either.
And that's not good. So if the job goes south, you may have a problem. You're going to have a battle on your hands because you don't have a professional truly that is accountable.
Well, sticking with the example of roof consultants, they do go and hire an engineer usually out of town to provide the engineering documentation, and he would carry professional liability insurance.
Okay.
In theory, but the association really never meets this person or collects that professional liability insurance information from them. But the bigger concern is if the consultant gives any sort of direction to the contractor runs into a situation and he needs guidance. Hey, this wasn't like the way it was designed and specified. I need to do a different type of flashing here on the roof.
Right.
And if the roof consultant says, hey, yeah, that's fine, that's okay, then now the contractor is a lot less liable for, or maybe not liable at all for that repair, because the roof consultant approved it. He becomes a design professional in that respect. And in that case, a design professional without professional liability insurance gives the association very little to go after. In the case that he spec'd the wrong thing, that flashing leaks, for example, and then you've got massive damage into the building. Sure.
Now, one of the parts that I really love is the owner representation services. Let's talk more about that. I think that's an important facet of what you do.
Yeah, the owner representation services that we provide are really focused on making sure that you get what you pay for, that the project is done correctly. The other thing that we do as part of the owner representation services is to intercede on behalf of the association as our client in cases where things go awry. For example, we had one project a while back where it just happened to be this record rainfall, rainy season, and the contractor did his best to seal up the roofs that he was working on, but inevitably water got through the temporary protections, and there was a lot of water into these houses due to this record rainfall in the middle of this roofing project. And as owner reps, we are able to go out there, evaluate water intrusion damage, make recommendations. We document it with infrared thermal imaging and moisture meters, and we can kind of address and tackle kind of anything that would pop up during a project or any problems that would pop up. And then as part of the contract documents that we prepare as owner reps, we write ourselves in basically as the first step in any type of dispute resolution. We're kind of the first ones to say, hey, this you really do owe the contractor this, or no, the contractor really messed up here, or whatever. And then if they don't like our opinion, then it moves on to legal matters, of course.
Now, what's important about that owner representation is that in many cases, these large projects are going on off season. So they're happening when a lot of homeowners aren't there, or the board's maybe not even there.
Yeah, half the projects we manage as consult engineering is done during the summers when a lot of the board members don't even want to be around. They don't want to hear the noise. And the ones that do tend to could hang around a little longer, they definitely go up because they don't want to deal with it.
Sure.
So half of our projects were basically just reporting to the board through email correspondence,
pictures,
and corresponding with the project manager. The property manager, of course.
Sure. Now, once an association has decided to hire a professional for the project, what's the next step? What do they do?
The association really needs to determine what they want. Do they just want basic construction administration services, or do they want to have that owner rep service? Because that owner rep service is a premium service, and premium services inevitably cost more than basic services. So you really need to, whoever you hire, whoever you're interviewing for your project manager for your project, you really need to narrow that down ahead of time. What level of services do you want them to provide? And ask them what they're capable of providing. Are they capable of providing owner rep services? And another question is that association should be asking is if you're provided a lump sum bid by a project manager, then are they really going to give you the attention you need when things pop up and there's problems? Or are they going to charge you outside because it's outside of the scope of their bid? So those are the kinds of questions you really want to nail down and get finalized before you move forward.
So it's like any service that you're contracting, you need a scope of work for the engineer.
Right.
And that's the only way to really compare the engineers, I guess, too.
Right. And once you've selected an engineering firm or architectural firm to do project management, there's typically 3 phases in the industry that we follow. And the first phase is a condition assessment. A lot of times I've had clients, I had a church that that told me that they wanted me to manage their roofing project. And we went out and walked the roof and said, wow, this roof is in pretty good shape. And so we spent a fraction of the money testing the roof, and the roof passed all the tests that we put into it. We had the church spend a little bit more money to fix the roof, and lo and behold, they were under 10% of what it would cost to replace them, and they've got another 7 years out of their roof.
Wow.
So the first thing to do is have that condition assessment done, have somebody properly evaluate the project, whether it's a building restoration project, asphalt project, roofing project, anything. The next step is that design and bidding phase, where the owner rep, or the project manager should really be working hand in hand with the association to design what type of scope they want to have done,
right?
And then to professionally put that out to bid so that the association can get back apples to apples bids. And then, of course, once the client or the owner or the condo rather selects a bidder to award the project to, that's when you segue into the true project management phases of the project.
Now, I know we keep mentioning condominiums, but certainly this would be applicable for homeowners associations that are doing large asphalt jobs, or maybe remodeling of a clubhouse, or roofs on a clubhouse, or even a major pool renovation.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Homeowner associations, where we tend to provide this service the most is in that asphalt, because a lot of times the master association owns the private roads throughout the community, and when they need milled and resurfaced, this is a prime example. And then most of our other work with homeowner associations definitely deals with clubhouses, pavers around the clubhouse, pavers around pool decks, and those types of projects.
Okay, well, we've only scratched the surface. We're talking about project management. We have Josh Porter in the studio today. He's the president for Consult Engineering. And Josh, people are going to have more questions. How do they get a hold of you after the show?
They can call us at 1-800-550-3379, or they can check us out on the web at consultengineering.com.
Okay, this is The Boardroom, your radio authority for everything condominium and HOA related. We hope you'll stick with us. We got Josh Porter, a lot more to come. Stick with us. And welcome back to The Boardroom. Glad you stuck with us. My name's Trevor Lutz. I'm the president and CEO of Sandcastle Community Management. We're a locally owned and operated management company, specialized in association management, condominiums, co-ops, HOAs, marinas, any type of association, commercial communities, you name it, we can handle it for you. And we provide this little program called The Boardroom every Saturday morning here on Fox News. And today we have Josh Porter in the studio. Josh is the president from Consult Engineering. We are talking about project management, and we just only sort of scratched the surface. I hope we can get to all of this today, Josh. Let's just dive right back into it. You know, we talked about before, and you gave the example of you were working with a church and took a look at the roof. They were planning on redoing the roof, and after some review of that, determined they didn't need to do that. That's a huge service. You know, let's talk a little bit about what the condition assessment really entails. If an association thinks they need to do something, you know, what do you do as far as a condition assessment?
The condition assessments are typically visual only, and you're relying on experience and expertise. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to determine the total useful life of the asset that's being considered. And then we want to see what the remaining useful life is. And if it doesn't make sense, for example, if you have a 15-year asset, you're at year 10, and I can't determine that there's 5 years left, then we got to figure out what's the problem, what's causing this damage, what's causing it to age faster than it is. That's the main thing we're really focusing on is evaluating what kind of life is left. Now, a lot of times when we're hired to do condition assessments, the association already knows that they feel it's at the end of their useful life. Maybe contractors have told them that. So a lot of times we're just going out there and confirming that and putting it into a written form.
Sort of walking down the street and tripping over potholes. That's sort of the giveaway.
Yeah. Sometimes it's real obvious, but you know, obvious is always in the eye of the beholder.
That's right.
Obvious to an expert sometimes.
There you go. Well, does the condition assessment, does it result in a report, or is this informal? How does it work?
The association should always request a report from their consultant. It's so critical to meet their fiduciary responsibility and to create a historical record of the condition of that asset, why money was being spent to replace it, and things of that nature. The report should also include recommendations, options when applicable, and it should also include estimates of what it's going to be.
I was going to say, the board really wants something put in the file, because if they add, let's say, another 5 years to the useful life of their roof, and then something happens down the road, I mean, they need to be able to justify why they added that 5 years.
Exactly.
Okay. You know, what does the association do once they receive the report? What do they typically do? Some of them may be scared and put it in a drawer and not look at it again. But
sometimes when the estimate inside the report is too high, it kind of gets filed in file 13 and they kind of stick their head in the sand. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often. But what they need to do is sit down with the consultant, and they need to determine which recommendations they should follow. Sometimes there's only one recommendation. In the case of a roof, it's replace the roof.
Right.
And then there might be a couple different options. But other than that, they should talk about those options, talk about those recommendations with the consultant prior to putting it out to bid.
And so you walk them through that process and help them make those decisions then, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Who's responsible for bringing the bidders to the table? I mean, that's always a big one. I mean, some associations sort of go off in several different directions. Everybody's talking to different contractors, but who's really responsible for that if you're using a consultant?
The consultant can typically provide all the bidders that are required. They should be able to come up with contractors that they've worked with, contractors that they've vetted, that they know are responsible. In some cases, the association already has a relationship with a contractor that they like, and which may not be on the consultant's bid list. I would be very leery about consultants that refuse to include them on the bid list or things like that. We're pretty open in our bid process. But once the bids come back, regardless of how the numbers fall, we always explain to the association whether we have experience managing that contractor or not.
And do you give an honest evaluation? I mean, if this is a contract that has been a problem or caused problems for the associations, I assume you provide that information to the boards.
Yeah, we're very realistic. If I have a contractor that has created a lot of problems or has just performed very poorly for maybe a past large project or something like that, they typically won't be on my bid list anymore anyway. So a lot of the contractors we work with are people that we have had long-term relationships with. And we know that the clients and the associations, homeowner and condo associations, have been happy with their services in the past. The key for us is, have we actually managed that contractor before and communicating that to the association? If they bring in their own bidders, and this happens a lot, they bring in their own bidder that I've never heard of, never seen, don't know anything about, and they end up being the low bid because they don't know what they're getting into or whatever. And the association ignores the fact that we have no experience working with that person, and they go ahead and hire them anyway. I mean, a lot of cases those projects turn out disastrous because that contractor was not expecting to have the level of scrutiny that we're going to put onto them.
Well, probably even more important at that point that you're there. Because, if things go south, then at least you're there to help them and keep an eye on the job. Yeah,
that's where we really make our money is and we pay for ourselves is making sure that contractors that want to come out and they're used to doing, grade C work, and we're making sure that they do grade A work.
Sure. How are bids received? What's the process to bring bids into the table? In
the private sector, there really is no laws in Florida governing how the bidding process should occur, unlike if you were doing a public sector job. What we have our own ethical standards for bidding that we put into place, and they're modified in order to meet the requirements of associations. Associations, once they make a decision to go forward with a project, they tend to want to make decisions quickly, and they want to choose a contractor quickly. So what we do is we receive all of the bids by email or fax, and then what we request is that we receive sealed bids to follow within, typically a week or two after that. And the reason why is because we can get all of the bids by fax or email in and compile them that same day and turn them around within 24 hours and give them back over to the association. And if the association is ever leery or concerned about whether there was any kind of funny business with the bids, then we always have those sealed bids to hand them so that they can break the seal on and open and see that the sealed bid actually matches the bid tabulation that we provided them.
So you actually keep those bids sealed then indefinitely?
Yeah, in all my projects, and I've never had an association actually request the sealed bids. They sort of just trust us.
Right.
And for all of our past projects for the last 4 years, we have sealed bids for every project, and they're still filed away. So if at any time anybody wants to pull those sealed bids, they can. And then what assistance does the consultant provide then when the association's choosing the contractor? You've got the bids in hand now. So are you going to be giving recommendations or screening, or tell me how that works? I would be, as an association, be very, very, very leery of any consultant that recommends a contractor. Okay. The purpose of the bidding process, the ethical purpose of the bidding process, was to bring several contractors that can all do the job and do it right. So when you have a consultant that is recommending one contractor over any other, I would be very, very leery of why is he recommending this one person? Why did he even bring everybody else to the table? I would start questioning the entire process.
But if the board says to you, all things being equal, these guys are all within, a percentage point of each other in price, who would you rather work with? Is that not a legitimate question?
And I always answer it the same way. I say it's not my choice, because you got to be very careful. I don't want to take ownership of the project. I want the client to feel like they own their project. So in that case, let's say you get all the bids in and they're all very close and they're having trouble deciding. The next logical step, and the consultant should be acting as a good liaison between the board and all these bidders during this process, is to schedule interviews with the contractors.
I think that's important. Sure.
Start with maybe the lowest. If you're bidding out to 5 contractors, start with the lowest 2 or 3. And bring them in and interview them. And one of those contractors, in every project we've ever done interviews in, one of those contractors tend to really stand out and impress the board. For whatever reason, their personality gels with the boards. They really like him. They stand out and they say, you know what, he's 1% higher than the other guy, but let's go ahead and go with him.
Sure.
For the vast, I would say for more than 50% of the projects, though, the bids are rarely that close.
Okay.
There tends to be a contractor who's 10% maybe less than everybody else.
Sure.
And so the question gets asked, well, what do you think about this low bidder? What do are you concerned that their bid was 10% lower? And the answer I always give is, I wouldn't have brought him to the bidding table if I didn't think he could do the job. So, that's kind of where I leave it at that.
So ultimately, it's always the board's decision or the association's decision as to who they select. You're there to guide, bring people to the table, make sure things are honest and on an even playing field, but ultimately it's their decision.
Correct.
Okay. Once the board's selected a bidder, what happens next?
The next steps are that a notice of award gets sent out. And then the permit documents start getting prepared. If the job requires permitting, the consultant should be an engineering or architectural firm that can provide those permit documents for the contractor. And then the contract is prepared between the association and the contractor. And there are 2 types of contracts that are most popular out there that a lot of consultants are using. And that is the AIA contract, which stands for the American Institute of Architects. And then the other standard contract form is the EJCDC, which stands for the Engineers Joint Contract Documents Committee. We at Consult Engineering like to use the EJCDC. We think it's a little more thorough, provides a little bit more protection for the client, and generally does a better job of the types of projects that we're going to be facing down here. Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit more. If people have questions, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to schedule an appointment? How does that work? We do all proposal visits for free, so you can have us out. We like that word. Yeah. Pick our brains, bring us out there, and we would like to look at the project or whatever you're looking at. And you can call us at our 1-800 number. That's 1-800-550-3379, or you can connect with us on the internet at consultengineering.com. And how much lead time do they, if they're planning a big project, how much time do they need to give you to get ramped up to join them for that initial meeting? We can typically schedule a meeting with them within 5 business days of when they first make contact with us. Okay, great. Well, we have Josh Porter in the studio, the president of Consult Engineering. We're talking about project management here on the boardroom, and we hope you'll stick with us. We got a lot more. And welcome back to the boardroom. We're glad you stuck with us. I was just saying off air that this show's gone very quickly. A lot of information to absorb, and hope you're sticking with us and absorbing all this. If you're not, you certainly can go back and re-listen to the show. It's available at www.sandcastleradio.com, and all the podcasts, all the bios and pictures of all the speakers you're hearing here on the Radio Authority of 92.5 are available there for your listening at your leisure. And so, Josh, we're talking about project management, and Josh is the president of Consult Engineering, and we're getting into some of the meat of it. Let's talk about during the project. What are the responsibilities of the consultant? We've hired this. We've gotten the bids. We've determined what the scope is. We've signed the contract. What should our project manager be doing? There's a minimum expectation associations should have of their consultant during project management. At a minimum, they should be inspecting the work that's being conducted as required by the building official. A good example of this is in building restoration projects. Most building officials do not have inspectors that are qualified to go out and check concrete restoration work and things of that nature. So your consultant, being an engineer or architect, should be able to go out and do those inspections for the building official. In fact, the building official will require that. They should also be processing all of the change orders and pay applications and be able to explain these documents to the association. If you're getting just change orders emailed to you or mailed to you from your consultant without any kind of explanation of, well, we discovered this or anything like that, then that's might be a problem. And then when they process the pay applications, they should be making sure that they're receiving the lien releases and waivers of liens to protect the interests of the association.
Now I know there's people that are saying, change orders. There aren't going to be any change orders. We've thought this out. We've got a great scope. Don't kid yourself. There's always change orders, aren't there?
Right. Yeah. Well, I always tell clients, you kind of want one change order. You always want a change order with some credits back.
There you go. I never see those.
So. In a lot of our projects, and this is really important too when hiring a consultant, this kind of goes back a little bit to the planning phase and the estimate. At Consult, we pride ourselves on giving accurate estimates. And there are some elements out there in the industry that would give you an estimate that might be slightly low or purposely low in order to get the ball rolling and get the project going. And then they just figure, well, the rest will be covered by change order later. And then it's the association that ends up doing double assessments and things like that.
Now, what about the owner representative part? What should we be expecting from a consultant as our owner rep?
As the owner rep, the consultant should be anticipating those overruns, those change orders before they occur. They should also be able to explore alternatives, things they can change in order to, in the project scope, in order to avoid maybe some of those overruns or unanticipated expenses. They should be able to report not only the construction budget to the client, but their own engineering budget. If they're not reporting, this is what we projected to spend in engineering fees or management fees, and here it is on a weekly basis or biweekly basis of where we're at with those fees, then that's something you really want to make sure you're getting from them. They should also be tracking the project progress and reporting that to the client as well. Is the contractor hitting his milestones? By the 50% point in the project manager should be able to come to the association and say, hey, I anticipate that the contractor is going to be on schedule or he's not. And the contract should have clauses in there for liquidated damages and things like that to cover the interests of the association as well.
And this reporting is really important. As we talked about, a lot of times you're doing these projects during the summer and there's no one around.
Exactly. Yeah. The reports are a lot of times the only information you're going to get. And every time, Consult goes out to a job site, we produce a field report while we're on site. And that's usually sent within 24 to 48 hours to the client. So you're only about a day behind the actual events of the project, and you're getting very detailed information on what's going on.
Excellent.
If contingencies are discovered, the owner representative and engineer should also be able to provide engineering directive, provide the engineering plans that would be necessary, and be able to produce these things quickly so that the contractor can continue moving forward. And a lot of times, again, those contingencies need to be explained to the association, and the details need to be copied to them as well.
Sure.
Incidental damages. We talked before about the roof and the leaks that happened. Those are things that the owner rep should be able to address, document, photograph, and make recommendations on any kind of incidental damages that occurred during the project. Another one is concrete restoration. Occasionally, a contractor didn't know that he wasn't adequately protecting a sliding glass door, for example, and while he's chipping the concrete nearby, it scratches and damages the door.
Sure.
Those are incidental damages that an owner rep should be working with the association to walk through and address and deal with.
Excellent. And then also, if a dispute arises, I assume you guys are right there. You're in the middle of it.
Yeah, and according to the EJ CDC contract documents that we produce, we are written in as the first stop in dispute resolution.
Let's talk about the payment schedule. That's the hard part, writing the check for all this. How does that work? How do the contractors work typically, and how do you work with them on it?
Well, the first thing you want to be aware of is for pretty much any project, you should never hire a contractor that requires money up front.
I like when you say that, because it's amazing how many guys out there say, "Oh, I just need 30 or 50% up front." That's
right,
a huge red
and their
flag.
explanation is materials, right? And what we always recommend is if the project is significantly material heavy, in other words, materials are 80% of the cost and labor is only 20%,
Right.
because you're inlaying a gold onto your high-rise tower or something like that. In those cases, we do allow for payment of materials before the project start date, but not until the materials have been ordered, delivered, and are stored in the contractor's warehouse. And we will drive to the contractor's warehouse and photograph and make sure that that material is marked for your project before we will release payment for that.
Because the quickest way to see the contractor not show up is to give them 50% up front.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And you also lose a lot of your incentive for the contractor to do a good job. If you pay the contractor 25% up front, and then the contractor shows up and he starts doing a very terrible job, you can't sit there and wag your finger at the beginning of the project and bring them in line and say, hey, you better do this job right, because they just throw their hands up in the air and say, well, we're going to walk off this job then, and because they're up, they got money.
That's right. Now, what about the payment schedule? Do you work with the contractor to arrange a payment schedule that works for them and the association?
Every contract, we actually allow the contractor to determine the payment schedule.
Okay.
Because there's two reasons. One, some contractors will just wait till the end of the project and just bill you for the whole thing. Some contractors will bill you on a monthly basis. Some will bill you every 2 weeks. I mean, they all have different preferences. The key is that when they send in a pay application, it's only covering things that they've actually completed. And the other thing that we put in to protect the association in our contract documents is to make sure that there's a 10% retainage on every payment. So that at the very end of the project's substantially completed and the contractor has significantly demobilized from the project, you still have 10% of his money to make sure punch-out items are completed.
There you go. Now, how should associations be protecting themselves, though, on overruns? We talked about those change orders, and those are inevitable. How should an association protect, though, against that?
This goes right back to that planning phase and having a good consultant to establish a good contingency for you. Every project, we recommend a contingency. Most projects tend to hover in the 10 to 20% range. For larger projects with a lot of fixed quantities, we might even just recommend down to 5%. We have a parking garage project coming up here soon that we're recommending a 5% contingency on. For projects with massive amounts of unknowns, we've been known to even recommend up to a 25% contingency. And when the association either is taking the money out of reserves or they're special assessing their members, they need to assess for the anticipated engineering fees, anticipated contractor fees, and the contingency that's recommended by the engineer.
Now, we talked about a lot of these projects are being done during the summer, but in cases where they're not, or in the cases where there's a board member or a board representative available, how do you coordinate working with that person? And do you recommend that?
I do recommend working with somebody from the board, somebody who can attend the meetings, and a lot of times on our projects, some clients require it. And we're very adaptable to that. We'll coordinate, we'll make sure our project manager calls that liaison to the board and meets them on site when we meet with the contractor. For most of our projects, they simply just want us to check in to let them know that we were there. And once they start getting some of our reports, they tend to be much less concerned because they see how detailed our field reports are, how frequently we're going to the job site, and how much oversight that contractor has. Once they start seeing that, they kind of tend to back off. But we definitely recommend having some regular scheduled meetings and a board liaison at least during the beginning of the project, for sure.
And so those meetings are on site. You're going through whatever the process or whatever the project entails, talking about the time frames, and so that board liaison is there with you during those meetings then.
Absolutely.
Okay. What happens in the event of the association or unit owners suffer damage? There's always flat tires and things like that for a roofing job. But, what about if we get into some real damage?
Before the project begins, this is typically conducted between like the contract phase and when work commences. A pre-condition assessment should be done of the entire property. The contractors will oftentimes do this themselves, maybe even with a video camera to document so that they don't get blamed for anything that they didn't break. But your consultant should really be kind of going through and doing this as well. And that will help alleviate and eliminate a lot of disputes right off the bat as far as did the contractor damage this or not.
I know a lot of times before a large roofing project, the consultant and the roofing contractor will want to go through every second floor unit and take a look at ceilings to make sure to see if there's cracks or other conditions that exist.
Absolutely. And the other thing, too, especially dealing with roofs and ceilings, we have to make a distinction between whether the damage that the contractor caused was due to negligence or whether it was what we call incidental damage. And incidental damage, like on a roofing project, is where if a roofer is on the roof and it's causing causing the drywall to crack, the question you have to ask or answer is, would that have happened if any contractor was on the roof? If that would have happened with any contractor walking on the roof, it's not really negligence, it's just incidental damage, and it's not really technically the contractor's fault.
A lot of times the contractor will still step up and take care of those things.
Surprisingly enough, yes, because they really put their reputation forward and they want to make the client happy.
Okay, we've covered some great information here, Josh. We've been talking about project management here on the boardroom. Josh Porter, the president of Consult Engineering. And Josh, unfortunately, there's so much more we could talk about on this topic, and we'll never get to it. People have burning questions out there. People have flaking asphalt. They have problems. So how do they get a hold of you?
The best way is to call our 1-800 number at 1-800-550-3379, or check us out on the internet at consultengineering.com.
And we're thankful you were here today. And until next week, we wish you well. Bye-bye.